been a while since I've last vlogged. My name is Lee, and earlier this year, back in February, I had been diagnosed with something called inattentive ADHD. All my life, I've experienced things like making a ton of careless mistakes, being very impulsive, having a very, very short attention span, having poor listening skills, laziness or apathy, experiencing no follow through when it comes to projects or certain things. I'm heavily disorganized, like all of the time. I'm easily distracted by external stimuli. I've always had trouble with forgetfulness. I've had problems with academic underachievement, and I faced many difficulties with peer relationships. I'd often feel discouraged. I suffer from low self-esteem and have always suffered from low self-esteem. I might have even experienced depression at some point in my life, especially like during a dark chapter in my life. I've always had anxiety and even still wrestle with anxiety today. I have a very low frustration tolerance, and I have this fear of rejection, otherwise known as RSD, or rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It actually relates to a lot of people, specifically with inattentive ADHD. But I'll try to explain more on that later, if not another video. And you might be wondering, doesn't everyone experience these things though? Yeah, sure, everyone does, but people with inattentive ADHD experience it to a more extreme degree. Almost to the point, actually usually to the point where it could affect your everyday life. Now, it may vary from person to person with inattentive ADHD, but the main reason why we're so different, like compared to people without ADHD, is basically because our brains are wired differently. But more specifically, it's our neurotransmitters, especially dopamine and norepinephrine, if I'm saying that right. Those appear to be less available in specific regions of our brain. Now, there are three main types of ADHD, as far as I know. The main type of ADHD is the combined type of two subtypes of ADHD. The combined type is being both hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, and easily distractible. While the other two being subtypes, one is more on the hyperactive side with impulsiveness, and then the last subtype, being what I know as inattentive ADHD, is more predominant in inattentiveness and distractibility. And I just have to say that once I found out that I was inattentive ADHD, I felt like I found this side of myself that I've been searching for my entire life. Sometimes I would wonder like why I would gravitate towards doing the things that I do. And then when I learned about ADHD and then I looked up the symptoms and heard like a YouTuber talking about it, I heard Dr. K talking about it, I just felt like what he was describing was my entire life. And that's what really motivated me to get diagnosed. And then once the diagnosis was official, I was shook. Like, I couldn't believe that I had grown up as an inattentive ADHD person without even knowing. Now that I finally know, I'm just trying to understand myself better and understand why I can be so sensitive or all these other things. I know I only explained like a handful of the symptoms, but there's like so much more when it comes to inattentive ADHD. And today I just want to talk about what makes it so hard as an inattentive ADHD person. So I read this on Attitude magazine and I thought I'd bring it up. I'm gonna just read off of it. So I'm gonna look over here, okay? Because it's hard for me to like talk and recall some things in general. So anyway, inattentive ADHD, once called ADD, is a subtype of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder that often manifests as limited attention span, distractibility, forgetfulness, or procrastination. People with inattentive ADHD make careless mistakes because they have difficulty sustaining focus, following detailed instructions, and organizing tasks and activities. I feel that, like, every day. I feel that so much. I experience that. They are easily distracted by external stimuli and often lose things. They may leave projects unfinished and appear not to listen when you speak. These are all symptoms of inattentive type ADHD, and they are not personal defects. And after reading things like this about inattentive ADHD, it means so much to me to know that, like, to put it bluntly, to know that I'm not a failure, because there are so many things that I struggle with as an inattentive ADHD person where I would just be extremely hard on myself. Like, I would feel like I'm not good enough in some areas of my life or some things that I do. But the reality is, I'm actually constantly challenged by like said symptoms of being easily distracted or trying to pay attention to things that are just so boring that I can't seem to get my entire focus on it unless like I listen to music or I cut off all distractions just to be able to focus. Like I was saying before, people in general do experience these things, but for someone that's diagnosed with inattentive ADHD, they experience it to a more extreme degree. So, like, we're just different from people without ADHD. And this is something that you're born with. Inattentive ADHD isn't something that's like, that you just develop. You're actually born with ADHD. And as far as I know, it's incurable. So people with ADHD or inattentive ADHD or, hyperactive ADHD, what we have to do is so much harder than other people because we have to manage our symptoms every single day, every single moment, trying to adapt to the society around us, to the people around us. And, that's not to say like that anyone's at fault because it's just the way the world is, like the world isn't made ADHD friendly as far as I've learned. And it makes a lot of sense. When you grow up as someone like with inattentive ADHD without knowing that you've had it, like you would think everything that's wrong with you is normal. You were probably like me and you were always wondering like, why can't I be like such and such person, such and so person, right? Why can't I be as focused or as determined as this guy over here or that person over there? Like, I know I can work as hard as them, maybe even harder, but there are just so many factors that hold me back, that hold you back as an inattentive ADHD person. It just becomes so discouraging. We struggle with failure, like things that we perceive as failure, when in reality, it's not that we're failing, it's simply that it's sometimes so hard for us to manage if we're not aware of why we're being so distracted in the first place. Like, there's no way we would have known that we're easily distracted by external stimuli. We can probably like understand like, oh yeah, I'm easily distracted, but we didn't know that's like part of our condition as an inattentive ADHD person. And yeah, so like after reading that from Attitude magazine, I just couldn't agree more. To this day, I reread paragraphs and even lines in paragraphs for like 2 to 5 minutes just to remember what I've read. Sometimes it takes even longer than that. And it's usually because it's too boring for me to read, or it's just not stimulating enough to keep my attention. But like, if it were something that I had a genuine interest in, I could read it just fine. Or like, if I'm trying to focus on something, it's really easy for something else to catch my attention. Like, I could be doing homework and then get distracted by a candle flame for like minutes at a time, even hours at a time, because somehow looking at dancing flames is just so captivating to me. Like, just the other day, I was staring at ants walk into a bug trap for hours. Like actually. And I was doing that while I was trying to focus on writing things to talk about in this video. And then there's forgetfulness. Sometimes I have a lot of important errands or chores in the back of my head, and I would work on one while I forgot about the others. Or like when I go to the grocery store to buy more toothpaste, and I end up seeing all these other things I need, like, ooh, I could use some snacks in my room or more laundry detergent. I end up getting all these other things that I usually don't plan for. And then I get home and realize that I totally forgot to buy the toothpaste. Stuff like this happens to me every day. And I mean every day, like every single day. And as for procrastination growing up, I always used to feel all kinds of bad and guilty after putting things off at the last minute. Even when I try to do things on time, I still somehow manage to finish the rest or do all of it like as last minute as possible. And that's not intentional. Thankfully, I usually get things done, but for the times that I'm not able to because I lost interest or motivation to finish, or the workload was just too much to handle at that last minute, like it would discourage me a lot. And then when I learned about inattentive ADHD people being easily distracted by external stimuli, it made so much sense to me because, okay, here's what I experience every day, 24/7, okay? Like, let's say I was on the phone. Depending on like, their earbuds or their microphone, I can pick up the smallest noises, like feet being dragged on the floor. I can hear the wind hitting the microphone or even like hair hitting the microphone. Or like if someone was in the kitchen, I can hear random cooking noises like the pan frying or people coming in and out of the house, door knocking, things getting tipped over. Even if the volume was like from the background noise, even if that volume was super low, I would notice it. I would hear it. And that's not something that I actively try to hear for either. It's like the easiest way for me to describe it is like I'm just on all the time. Or for example, like see that curtain in the background, like, if I can focus on this here. Like, just glancing at this for 2 seconds, I would already notice the shapes in the curtain, the little slight folds, and the threads, the color, the way the lighting is like hitting the, this part here and how the shadows are and how I would notice all of that in an instant. That's not intentional. Like, that's just how my brain works. And I always thought that was normal, but when I hear other people talking about certain stuff and I would kind of compare like my observation to theirs, I just never thought it was weird until I learned more about ADHD. I guess my attention to detail is just really, really good. I don't know. Whenever I try to get something done, I have to listen to something like music. And it has to be music without lyrics because not only am I distracted by sights and sounds, I'm also prone to daydreaming a lot. For example, like I could just be looking out the window. Like I can look out the window and I can just be like thinking of random stuff, like flying as a superhero out the window or being like Spider-Man. Or if it's like lyrics that I'm listening to, I could like imagine a scenario where like, I don't know, I'm doing something related to the song, or if it's someone else related to doing something in the song. And this, like, it could literally be anything that I daydream about, but it could happen for like minutes at a time or even longer. It just happens. And I can't really stop myself until I'm aware that it's happening. And then like before I'm aware, like I said, like a lot of time could pass. Before I knew that I was inattentive ADHD, like I would just let it happen. And it could be bad because if they were thoughts of my past, like it could be like bad moments sometimes that I would get stuck on. It could ruin my day, or even worse, like it just makes me feel bad in general. I would wish that I could have done things better. I'd essentially just get stuck in a thought loop of thinking about things from my past. But now I learned that when that happens, I'm able to snap myself out of it by first becoming aware that, one, that I'm daydreaming, and two, is because when my brain does that, it's essentially trying to protect me, basically from it happening again, from whatever I suffered from in the past. Like it's trying to tell me, remember that time that happened? It's trying to tell me, let's hope that doesn't happen again. But like, since I never interpreted it that way, it would always hurt me like every single time. And this could happen on a daily basis. It used to happen on a daily basis. But now that I learned that you can be aware of it and you just have to remind yourself that, your brain is doing this because it's only trying to protect you. The beauty of it all is that, when you become aware of it, you have the choice of bringing yourself towards where you want to go. And as for losing things, I would say, personally, I don't have an issue losing things. But I think that's mostly because I happen to put my items in clusters of other related items, so it helps me remember that they're there. For example, like I leave my keys on a table, which is next to my work equipment, where my work equipment is in a backpack that is sitting on a chair. And so, like, when I'm ready to leave for work, I have all of those things next to each other and it's all ready to go. But the funny thing is, I have a rack in the corner of my room for my equipment, and I never put it there. And the reason why I do that is because there's a TV that just happens to be in the way, and I use that TV to work out when I'm playing like Ring Fit or Nintendo Sports. And it's there because like it just happens to be the perfect spot where like I can move my arms and legs without hitting anything because I have a small room. And that's why I don't put my work equipment there, because my TV's in the way. So like all of the items in my room, like it kind of looks like a sort of organized mess, but it also happens to be something that people with ADHD call doom piles. And I guess off the top of my head, doom piles means that we purposely put items in specific areas because we happen to remember it better there. And I think what I just described are my doom piles. And I actually never knew that. Like, I didn't know about the term doom piles until I talked with another friend of mine who I learned had ADHD, and we talked about all this kinds of stuff. And doom pile is actually an acronym for didn't organize, only moved. And it's hilarious because, like, that's my exact thought process on things. Like, without actually thinking about that, that's what I do. And then on the matter of leaving projects unfinished, I sadly relate to this too well. I'm someone who's always having ideas in the bathroom and like writing it down and stuff. And I've been able to try like a handful of them, but sometimes, almost always, I can never finish them. And I feel like when it comes to me like quitting on those ideas, it's always related to like how I feel like it could have been done better, or if I could have shot it better, or if it was because of something I didn't like, or even wondering like if what I was working on was good enough. And there were even times where I would just get burnt out because I did so much in the beginning and felt like I just couldn't keep it up and ended up getting discouraged by it. And so like my YouTube channel, for example, I often struggled with many ideas, a lot of things that I had said and done. Like I would have lots of videos that were ready for me to edit and ready for me to post. But I would always have these conflictions of like, is this something that's good enough for people to hear? Is this something that people even want to hear? And I would contemplate like even if it was just good enough, like in editing, or if it's funny. I would think about these kinds of things for days, for weeks even, until it eventually even turned to years. And I felt like I was striving for perfection in a sense, because I feel like I always get in my own way, even if it's not related to YouTube videos. When it comes to just creating in general, I'm always trying to strive to like do my best. I always put my best foot forward because that's how I am as an inattentive ADHD person. And I didn't know that before. And I feel like that's probably the biggest reason that got in my own way of even making YouTube videos, because I lost sight of making things because there was something that I just wanted to say, that I just wanted to get out there. Like trying to make something and just trying to post it. Which leads me to talk about inattentive ADHD today, because I'm also trying to learn more about inattentive ADHD myself. And ever since I learned more about my inattentive ADHD, it started making way more sense to me as to why I was so hard on myself when it came to things like making my YouTube videos. And it's related to striving to be perfect, perfectionism. It just so happens that perfection stems from ADHD. I mean, not like all perfectionism. I just mean like for people with ADHD, we tend to strive for perfection. It's an overcompensation for past errors or for feeling not good enough. And I believe this is linked to the fact that people with inattentive ADHD struggle with low self-esteem. For me, I feel like I grew up with a low self-esteem because I've always experienced constantly being criticized, blamed and shamed for my symptoms of being forgetful, being lazy, being sensitive, and not being able to follow through on things. Low self-esteem leads to things like difficulty pursuing goals or trying new things due to the assumption of failure. Isolation, often due to the fear of rejection or criticism from others. Actually, I feel that very strongly. Difficulty saying no or enforcing other boundaries, often due to the desire to earn approval from others. From personal experience, I feel like I've always done that subconsciously, not to actively like get approval from people, but more on the page of like I don't want to step on their toes. I don't want them to get angry, and I just want to avoid any sort of conflict, or even to the point where like avoiding conversation if possible. That's where I relate to that very strongly. Self-esteem is the perception of yourself, and it tends to encompass things like your talents, personality traits, and accomplishments. Your self-esteem fluctuates based on the things happening in your life and the feedback that you get from others. And I believe those downsides of inattentive ADHD can also affect one's self-worth. Self-worth serves as a measure of how much you value yourself as a person, whether you consider yourself capable or lovable or even worthy of respect from others. That I've personally struggled with all my life. Reading this from a source that I've read, like other mental health conditions and chronic illnesses that don't have obvious physical signs, ADHD can carry a heavy social stigma. Some people may dismiss your needs or become annoyed and angry when asked to accommodate your condition. There's evidence that suggests people with ADHD may face discrimination throughout their lifespans. Parents are more likely to criticize and act coldly toward children with ADHD traits. Children are more likely to bully classmates with ADHD behaviors. College students are less willing to interact with young adults who have ADHD. Frequent rejection can eventually lower your sense of self-worth. To put it another way, if other people constantly treat you poorly, you may start to assume that you deserve it. I feel like that's something that I had experienced and resonate with very strongly. And for me, the reason why it hurts so much, like conversing with these narcissist figures in my life, is mostly because the majority of them happen to be people that I truly loved and cared about. Like I trusted them. And as a kid, that means a lot. It really defines you as a person, I feel like I am the way I am now, mostly because of what I had gone through, going through all kinds of mental and verbal abuse. Like, it was ridiculous. And I couldn't understand why I deserved to be treated so badly as a kid, or even as a young adult. Like, it got so bad to the point where I ended up making a habit of saying I'm sorry towards things that weren't even my fault. Whenever I said I'm sorry, it was always just to avoid making someone else angry. And I felt like it stemmed from those situations. Like, I didn't understand it before, but I think it was mostly to feel safe. I began putting other people's needs before myself entirely, just to make sure that they're happy and that I hadn't done anything wrong. It never occurred to me until now that I became conditioned to be that way. Living with this mentality for so long, it left me with very poor self-esteem and self-worth. It wasn't until I hit a certain rock bottom in my life that I decided that I deserved better. And to the very few people who have cared for me and actually care about my feelings, I dedicate this channel to you, as well as anyone else who may be going through the same thing that I had gone through, who want and deserve better in their life. I hope that what I have to say helps you. Oh, and that last bit about not being able to look people in the eye, I feel like I still do that, like on a daily basis. Like I could look at someone while talking to them for like a few seconds. I can look them in the eye, but then like I have to look away even if I'm not distracted, because I feel like what is distracting is looking at them. And I feel like for me it's because like I can read body language and like facial expressions. I can't say it's accurate, but when I notice those things, what's distracting is the thought of what they may be actually thinking and saying versus what they're actually telling me, right? It's like the idea of what they're saying is what's distracting me. I do that a lot. So when that happens, I have to look away, and it's just that much easier for me to listen. So it's kind of like I'm imagining their words like being written as they're being spoken, but it's also kind of, I feel like it's rude when I do that, and that's probably what they're thinking too. So what I do is like I'll use my gestures in relation to what they're saying to me to let them know that like, yes, I am listening. Like if someone was telling me like directions for, I don't know, where the amenities are, where the pools are, like when I'm working, they'll be talking to me and I'll be looking somewhere else. And then they'll be saying, oh yeah, the pool's over there. And then, the park is over here. And like, I'll repeat that. Like, oh, okay. So I don't repeat it. It's like, as they're saying it, I'm saying, oh, okay. So the pool's over there. And then you said the amenities are over there, right? It's like my way of being considerate to them that I am listening, but it's mostly because like I can't help it. And this is me 100% of the time. I feel like if you're someone with inattentive ADHD and you're struggling with the things I had struggled with, I encourage you to stay positive. Take things at your own pace and actually take baby steps, like all the steps that you need. A few years ago, I started my mental health journey. This is pretty much the same time I started making videos on this channel before I changed my name. And I did that before I learned I had inattentive ADHD. And then kind of recently when I was talking with a therapist, they said that's actually the first step you want to take when you discover you have inattentive ADHD. Like you want to have more compassion towards yourself. You need to learn how to love yourself and respect yourself, because someone with inattentive ADHD is actually very prone to low self-esteem and self-worth. And I actually felt like that's why I started my mental health journey in the first place, before I found out I had inattentive ADHD, because I felt like I was such a pushover. I felt like I had no backbone, and I wanted to change that. And being good to yourself, being nice to yourself, being your own best friend is hard. Like it's easier said than done. I feel like whether you had inattentive ADHD or not, because when you grow up with such a low self-esteem, a poor self-image of yourself, it's extremely hard to rewire your brain and really say the things to yourself that matter the most. It's hard to pick yourself up when you're the one kicking yourself down. And personally, I feel like I've done that a lot. Like I've beaten myself up to the point where I've been depressed, and I always tried to rely on someone else to like make the right decisions in my life. At that point, that's, where things got really bad and out of hand, where that like it led to my rock bottom. And that's when I learned that I had to decide to make the better choices for myself. And to a lot of people, like that's not obvious. I mean, for me, it wasn't obvious. I had a really weird upbringing, and I'm hoping that other people didn't have to go through what I did. But if you did, that's why it's important to learn how to become your own best friend and to learn how to pick yourself up when no one else can. I learned that when you learn to love and respect yourself, you're also at the same time becoming more confident in yourself as a person. That's the first thing I learned on my mental health journey, is that to gain true confidence in yourself is to love yourself as a person, all as you are. I feel like the best advice I can give for this kind of situation, and also the hardest advice I can give, is to really understand yourself as a person. You should really ask who you are, why you like the things you do, why you do the things you do, and answer yourself honestly. without judgment. And you can really ask yourself anything as long as it's like about you. You just kind of keep asking questions after the answers that you find, to the point where it's like you kind of find out, is this answer influenced by someone else, or was this something that I wanted at some point in my life? Because you'd be surprised, like you can find like that answer was influenced by your parents, or by like, you know, a friend or someone that you don't even talk to anymore. You would really start to question your beliefs and find that they probably came from someone else. But really, when you find these things out, don't judge yourself. Instead, acknowledge what they are and where they came from. And then from that point, you can decide if that's who you want to be. Like, is that where you want to go? And the beauty of all of that is that you can still decide if that's what you want, if that's where you want to go. You have the power at that point to really change your belief and to change who you are as a person. And then when you do that enough, you start slowly becoming more comfortable with yourself, because you start understanding who you really are, what you really think, what you really like doing. It makes it that much harder for other people to define you, because deep down, you know that what they're thinking about you is not you. And that might be maybe too literal of a sense of like understanding yourself, but that's how I do it. And I've been practicing the things that I've learned on my mental health journey since 2017, and that's a long time. I have to say it was not easy. So that's why I encourage people out there who are pursuing this to really take your time. You know, actually do it one step at a time, what you're most comfortable with, because it will take time. This is not easy, you know, learning to love yourself, being your own best friend, especially if you're someone like me who's grown up with inattentive ADHD, who's grown up with low self-esteem. And honestly, I don't think I could have gotten this far without the YouTubers that I learned all of this from. Like Ralph Smart, Infinite Waters, Casey Neistat, Dr. K, otherwise known as Healthy Gamer. I'm so grateful for you guys being there. Thank you for just being there for people like us. Thank you for being on YouTube. I feel like I couldn't even be doing this if it weren't for you, so I'm grateful. There's still a lot of stuff I haven't gotten to talk about yet for inattentive ADHD, but I'll talk about it next time. I have to go to Best Buy to pick up something. Stay positive, be kinder to yourself.